Hey everybody, it's Chrisis here from INJUSTAH, just with a very quick demonstration of how Swiss brackets work, specifically set up for the fighting game community. So we have announced that the INJUSTAH competition, the INJUSTAH Circuit, is going to be trialing a two-stage tournament format. And the first stage of that tournament is, uses a Swiss bracket. So each event will have two stages. The first is a qualifying bracket. The second is the top 8 bracket. And so we need to find a way to generate the top 8 players, or to find the top 8 players in the region for the top 8 for each of the circuit events. And we're going to be using Swiss format in the qualifying stage to do just that. Now, we are aware that most of the fighting game community have not experienced Swiss brackets before, so just to kind of unpack how Swiss works, I'm just doing this demonstration. So what we've got is we've got a demo, we've called it a pilot Swiss bracket that's been set up. There have been 8 registrations for that bracket. We got a couple of the personalities in the FGC to sign up. They've participated in the INJUSTAH prelim event and all the round 1 events, and they very kindly offered to be a part of this demo. Now, I'm going to be going through this manually and creating all of the matchups. Putting in the results manually, but the idea here is to show you how the bracket deals with the matchups, that sort of thing, so that you can understand how things work. Now, the first thing to note is that the Swiss bracket, no matter how long it is, so no matter how many rounds there are in the Swiss bracket, there's no knocking out. So nobody gets knocked out. It's not like double elimination where half of your players are knocked out at the end of, well, it's not half of the lower bracket is knocked out at the end of the first round, for example. It's not like that at all. So all players play in all of the brackets. Now, what happens initially is all of the participants are seeded, and they're seeded by tournament admins. So you can see here we've got a kind of a rough seeding going on here. And from the seeding, the bracket generates the first round of matchup. So I'm just going to process the check-in results very quickly, and I'm going to start the tournament. So I checked everybody in, and you'll see that this is a 6-round tournament bracket. So you can see the 6 rounds there all on screen, so from round 1 through to round 6, and you'll note that round 1 is the only one that's been generated, and that's because the first round is generated off of the seeding, but the second round onwards is generated from the results that take place. Now, all of our matches are best of 5, and so I'm going to enter in a best of 5 results. Now, you'll note that for the first round, seed 1 has been matched up with seed 5, seed 2 has been matched up with seed 6, seed 3 matched up with seed 7, and seed 4 matched up with seed 8. So essentially, the bracket gets divided into 2. The top seed of the, so everybody gets ordered 1 to 8, it gets divided into 2, so you've got a top range of 1 to 4, and then you've got a secondary range of 5 to 8 in seedings, and you'll see that the top seed in the top half is matched with the top seed of the bottom half. Second seed of the top half matched with the second seed of the bottom half, and so on. But that only really counts for the first round. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple of results. I'm going to say Castile won. Very important that you actually say who won. And because I know Castile, I'm going to enter in a high result. Now, for the 3-0 update scores, is the tournament live? I might have to refresh this. So I'm going to say DS won. You can ignore that it was a tie. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to make his a 3-0 as well. And then I'm going to make Gilbags a bit different. I'm going to make Gilbags a 3-2. Set him to win. Submit. Just make sure that this is getting captured. Yep. And I'm going to give Dr. Awesome a bit of a closer match. Okay, so as you would expect, the higher seed has won, and I don't actually know why this is not updating, so let's just do a quick refresh. There you go. Okay. So, I just refreshed so that the bracket would actually show the score. So for some reason it wasn't actually behaving as though it was live. So what you can see here is I've entered the results 3-0, 3-0, 3-2, and 3-1. And I'll explain why that's important later on. And so we've had a number of winners and we've had a number of losers. And out of that, the software generates the next round. So what I'd like to draw your attention to is what's happening over here. So we've got Waz versus Dr. Awesome, and we've got Castile versus Gilbags. And the key thing to note here is that it's pitched winners against winners. So winners in the top half of the bracket. So Waz won his match, Dr. Awesome won his match, and it's generated the bracket matching those two up. So they haven't lost a match, and the bracket has decided they need to face off against each other because somebody's got to lose a match. And Castile versus Gilbags. The other thing to notice is how it has generated these two particular matchups. So why did it put Waz against Dr. Awesome instead of Waz against I Am Castile? Well, again, what it's done is it's taken the top seed in the top half of the winners versus the top seed in the bottom half of the winners. So if you think about it, there are four players that are in the winners brackets, ordered in 1 to 4. So Castile, Waz, Gilbags, Dr. Awesome. So you've got 4 players. Divide that into 2. You've got a top 2 and a bottom 2. So the top of the first, the first seed in the top bracket goes against the first seed in the bottom bracket. Bottom brackets I do in quoted inverted commas, and so on. And then the other thing again is it does a similar sort of thing with the losers. So all of these players have lost their first round match, and so the bracket is putting it up, putting those players against each other. So at the end of this round, what's going to happen is in this section of the bracket, we're going to have players who've not just lost a match, but they've actually won a match as well. And then we're also going to have players who have lost both of their matches. So let's just go ahead and put in the scores. And there you go. So we've got, what's happened here? Did I not choose? Yeah, I forgot to click that button. So let's put that in there, saving and refresh. Rightio. So we've got our winners across the top again, and we've got a set of losers. And we're into round 3. And again, the bracket doesn't get generated until the round is completed. So all the matches are completed. And once again, we have a bunch of matchups. So let's just have a look at this side again first. So you recall that in round 2, these 4 players hadn't lost a match. So they got matched up against each other. Well, after round 2, 2 of those players lost a match, but 2 of those players are still unbeaten. And look at that. There are the 2 unbeaten players. So the bracket software has gone, okay, well, you guys haven't lost a match at all. You're going to face up against each other. If you want to understand why the bracket does it this way, what the bracket does is it tries to create matchups where both players have the best possible chance of winning their match. So that's the basic principle behind how the bracket algorithm works. So these two, not the best possible chance to win, the best possible chance to have an even game. That's the key. But at the same time, so that's the first principle: best possible chance to have an even game. But at the and an even game means that the 2 players have the best possible chance of winning against their opponent. But so that's the first principle. But the second principle is to give an advantage to the higher seed. So that's why you have 1 versus 5 instead of 1 versus 2 to start off with. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in scores. Okay, so we've had round 3 completed, and now there's only 1 unbeaten player, okay, and that is I Am Castile. Okay, so this is where the bracket algorithm gets too complicated to start to explain why a particular matchup has happened. But essentially, the bracket is trying to balance a number of things. As I explained before, it's trying to give you even matchups, but at the same time, it's trying to give advantages to the higher seed. But one of the other factors that the bracket tries to do is it tries to give you matchups that you haven't experienced before. So if we highlight IM Castiel in his first match he played against Halak, in his second match Gilbags, in his third match DS Waz, and now in his fourth match he's going up against Dr. Awesome. We're not going to go into, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail about exactly why it's creating the matchups. But if you have a look, I mean, Dr. Awesome is seeded number 4, so that's based on the principle. So Castiel is played against the number 1 seed. He's played against the number 3 seed. He's played against the number 5 seed. So he's going up against the number 4 seed. Oh, and of course he's gone up against, I said number 1 seed, against the number 2 seed. So he's gone against 2, he's gone against 3, and he's gone against 5. So the next even match is 4. So at the end of round number 4, Castiel is going to have played against everybody in the top 5. All right, and so on. So if we follow IM Castiel, he's now going up against Photographer. Waz is going up against Gallblood Guts, etc. Now, you'll note, so we've had 5 rounds. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom here, we've got people getting ranked. Okay, from 1 to 8, IM Castiel obviously is at the top of the table because he's played 4 and he's won 4. Waz is second because he's played 3 and he's won 2. And then what happens is we start to get a whole bunch of tied results. Okay, so whoops, I clicked on that. I shouldn't have. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to complete all of these rounds, and then we're going to have another look at the standings page and have a look at what's happened with ties, because how the software breaks ties is very important to understand. And we're into our last round. Okay. All right, so we've got all of our results in. Rounds 1 through 6 have been completed. We've got 1 unbeaten player. That's Castiel. He's won all of his matches. We've got 1 player that has only lost a single match. We've got 1 player who's only lost 2 matches. So what we have is we've got a clear top 3. There's no worry about tiebreakers or anything like that. But then we've got we've got 1 that's won 3 and lost 3, Gilbags. So actually our top 4 is completely there's no need for any tiebreakers. They are clear cut in the lead. But when we get to 5 and 6, and then again 7 and 8, we've got 2 ties. So what we have to understand is how the bracket software breaks down how those 2 ties get broken. So let's have a look at this. So Shade 667 and Photographer 1989, they are tied. They've won 2 and they've lost 4, so their score is exactly even. Then we've got TB, Bucholz, and points difference. Now, okay, so TB stands for number of matches wins against tied opponents. So what happens is, so TB is like kind of a head-to-head thing, I guess, is what you can look at it. So let's have a look at Shade 667 and Photographer 1989 and see if they actually played against each other in the bracket. So we'll highlight Shade 667, and yes, we do have a match. So in round number 2, Shade 667 versus photographer 1989 played against each other. And guess who won? It was Shade 667. So based on the match wins against tied opponents, Shade 667 beat photographer, so he gets an extra point. And so by the first tiebreaker, Shade 667 gets ranked higher. Now, unfortunately, we don't actually have something where it's dead even, because that's where Buchholz comes in. So what happens is, let's imagine we had 3 players that were tied against each other. Then what you'd have is you'd have 2 of these TB scores would be 1, and 1 of them would be 0. So we have to have a way of ranking the 2 that are dead even, and that is done through Buchholz. Now, Buchholz is an algorithm you can look up on Wikipedia. I'm not going to go into any detail to try and explain it because I don't really understand it myself. It's just something that the software calculates, and we trust that the software calculates it. But there are rare occasions where Buchholz is exactly equal. So Buchholz, as far as I understand it, what it does is it works out like the value of your wins based on the seeding. So if you beat a higher seeded player, you get a higher Buchholz score than if you beat a lower seeded player. That's essentially what it comes down to. But if you have a look over here, we've got a tied Buchholz score. Now, these players aren't tied, so this is just purely an academic discussion. What happens then, if the TB and Buchholz are tied, then points difference gets considered. And points difference takes into consideration how big your wins were. So, you know, if DS Waz and Gilbags ended up on the same number of wins and losses, 5 and 1 each, for example, well, I think that's difficult to get. But if they did end up on the same scores, then their points difference would matter. So, you know, if Gilbags had won all of his matches 3-2, but Waz had won all of his matches 3-0, then in the end, Waz would be ranked higher. Okay, so so that's essentially how the bracket works, and how it ranks players. So a couple of things to highlight. Firstly, if you win your matches, if you win all of your matches, you will get ranked higher than anybody else. So the most important thing is to win all your matches. That seems quite obvious, but people seem to forget that. People get really upset about who they get matched up against in this bracket. So, like, people might go, well, why did Goreblood Guts, who's seed 7, get ranked up against I Am Castile? Well, you know, because that's an uneven match, so quote unquote. Now, that's happened because that was the only available matchup that was there. You know, if we look at Goreblood Guts in this bracket, he was 1 and 5, so he'd lost. He'd only won 1 match. So who did I say he beat? Oh, I gave him the upset over Shade 667. Okay, so he won a single match, and yet he still ends up getting matched against an unbeaten player. And for some reason, players get really upset with those sorts of matches. No. I also didn't play against this other guy, and it would have been a much closer matchup. Well, I mean, the reality is you wouldn't have that matchup if you'd won your matches, because remember, you first get matched up against players. Other players who have won the same amount of matches, and then after that you get matched up against players who've got who've got a higher number of losses. So that's the most important thing. Win your matches, and you will get favourable matchups, and the bracket will go your way. The second thing that's really important is your head-to-head results. Okay, so if you are dead even with somebody and they are winning the same amount of matches as you, the key is to beat them. Because if you beat them, you're going to be ranked higher than them, because the head-to-head results gets taken into account. The third thing is that seeding does matter, but it's not absolutely critical. So if you look at how things work, the most important thing is how many matches you win. The second thing is how you do against individual opponents. And then the third thing The third factor is what your seeding was at the start of the tournament. So it's actually relatively, I mean, it's not unimportant, but it's less important that the seeding is right in Swiss, because Swiss gives you 6 rounds to prove yourself, as opposed to in double elimination. If we get the seeding wrong, you're screwed. You might be the number 2 player in the tournament, and end up having to fight your way through the lower bracket because you get a bad matchup in the first round. Yeah, double elimination is supposed to separate 1 and 2 from each other for as much as possible, for as long as possible in each of the rounds. So effectively, they should meet in the semi-final of the winner's bracket, and then again in the grand final of the winner's bracket. Whereas, so if you get that seeding wrong and they meet earlier on, then it's not so good. Anyway, so seeding's not as important. It still is important, but it's not as important. And then the final thing is the points difference matter as well. So how much you dominate your opponents does become important, but it's not as important as a win. A win is a win is a win. A good win only counts 4th in the grand scheme of things in terms of how your ranking goes, but it still does matter. So if you're worried about ending up in the middle of the field with the same number of kills or same number of wins as a number of other opponents, and in general your head-to-head is going to be relatively even. I mean, we're going to have a huge bracket on Saturday. We're going to have 40 people entering. So there's going to be 20 matches per round. So there are going to be a lot of opponents that you don't actually end up meeting. And so it does actually matter that you win your matches. The seeding does match a little bit, but it's really going to matter with a lot of ties in the middle of the field how well you win your matches. So a couple of final notes then about the bracket itself. As I mentioned, we're going to have 40 competitors, and 40 competitors with only 6 rounds. Well, we might end up with a lot of ties. And it's quite possible that we actually have all of the ranking methods completely tied for a number of players. So the score is the same, their head-to-head results are the same, Buchholz ends up the same, and the points difference ends up the same. And in that sort of situation, what we will do is we will add rounds. So we'll take the players that are still tied and we'll set up some head-to-head situations where they've got to play against each other, and that's going to be the tiebreaker. So whoever wins that match is going to be the one that gets pushed through into the top 8. All right, so this is a small bracket, much smaller than before, but hopefully it's explained the principles to you in such a way that you know how things are going to work. You can see that it's fair. If you've got any questions, just jump onto GameStar Discord, and I'll put a link in the description, and fire away. Tournament admins are ready to answer your questions. So do hope you enter on Sunday this weekend, and hope you have a good time playing Swiss Bracket for the first time. This is Chrisis, signing out.